Hey, this is a little bit different today because a few weeks ago, BunkmastaB and I were betting on the outcome of the 2022 NBA Finals. Of course, those have wrapped up by now, and they were played between the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics. BunkmastaB, of course, is a huge Boston Celtics fan, and me, well, you can tell who I was supporting. But part of that bet was that the loser would send the winner a book, any trade paperback that you'd like. So I was looking forward to BunkmastaB redeeming his bet debts, and he did that. So there you go. I received this package from him. I have no idea what's in here. I have no idea which book he sent me. So we're gonna do a box opening, and followed by a review of whatever is in here, and you'll find out with me. So let's get this open. This one away. Something in here. All right. I don't know what's in here. We'll find out. Okay, ready? You'll see before me. So. Those are 2 books. Awesome. I had to put the paper away because it was flying away. But those are 2 books I have not read. So the first one is by James Patrick, Kaiju Score. I know that's a book BunkmastaB reviewed on his channel, or he wrote an article about it. I will link to his article and to the video where he's basically reading the article on YouTube from this video. But I'm looking forward to reading that one. He gave it great reviews. And then the second book is Havok and Wolverine Meltdown. That's fantastic because I also have not read this book, and I'm going to be very interested in how that is, how that goes, and we'll review it here in a second. So thank you so much, BunkmastaB, for redeeming your debt. You actually sent me 2 books. Didn't even expect that one. So thank you so much. I will read them right away, and we'll check in with you on how I feel about them. We'll review them, we'll discuss them, and it was a lot of fun. So here we go. I have the man himself here, BunkmastaB. How are you doing, Ben?
Good, buddy. How are you, Torsten?
I'm doing very well. Now even better that you're here. So get to talk about the finals again, probably for the last time for in a while, because we're technically in the off season. And some cool books.
Really, I don't know. I kind of feel like anytime I talk to you, this is probably not going away anytime soon.
No, maybe my summer league is starting soon. So. We got that coming.
Yes. We can overact to a guy's pull-up jumper, and we can all convince ourselves how every player our team's drafted are going to be future all-stars. It's a tradition unlike any other.
Yeah. Well, it was so much fun watching the finals, and especially our friendly banter back and forth was like no bitterness, and it was fueled by really a close series, right? Like no team dominated the other at any point, other than some third quarters we don't want to talk about.
Hey now, that last game, the third quarter was the only time the Celtics decided to show up.
Yeah. Well, it was like Celtics were up, tied, Celtics were up, tied, Warriors were up, won, and won to a few games. Could have been a game 7 there in the end. But hey, I'm glad I won the bet. And the bet was the loser would send the winner a book, but you sent me 2 books. So
I did, and so as I mentioned in the note there, so as Torsten set up, he was a gentleman. So we, when we knew the teams were going to be set up like this, I suggested that we set up some kind of bet, and you wanted to keep it friendly and low stakes, and you said, hey, how about we just send one of the trade paperbacks that we have in our collection already, we keep costs on. And, I knew, and maybe this is why I lost is because right away I was like, well, if I lose, I'm sending a copy of the Kaiju Score. I mean, everyone on NMC Discord has heard me yell about it now for a while. My first published article was about Kaiju Score. I feel that way, actually, kind of in a similar way to you about Four Kids Walk Into a Bank, which actually I was going through my collection. I was like, oh, it would be a great one to send. Wait a second. And then I like flipped there. I was like, oh yeah, Torsten was the one who pushed me to finally get that. But the problem is I bought that in single issues, and my single issues are signed now by Jim Pat, the writer of it.
Nice.
So I didn't have a copy that I could send to you. So I broke the rules a little bit, and I went out and bought you a copy at my LCS because I knew that was what I wanted to send to you. But I'm also a man of my word, and the idea behind the bet was that we'd send a book from our collection that was technically not part of my collection, and so I had to see you Havok and Wolverine Meltdown. Yeah. So two very, very different books. I have very different opinions about them, and I'm very curious to see what you thought of them. Nice.
Yeah. No. I finished them within the last. I think I started Monday. Today's Thursday. So yeah, 3 days for both books. Thanks again for sending them. I really enjoyed them, both of them. And yeah, I couldn't even remember. I know you're reminding me it was like a book out of the collection. It's like, yeah, cool. No, that makes sense. And I don't know if you have the trade paperback or only just the singles, because it has like a foreword and like an introduction by a foreword by James Patrick, and then an afterword by Broo. So yeah, I don't know if you have those in the singles.
Yeah. So I don't know about the forward. So with Aftershock in the single issues, like their kind of MO, at least for the first issue, and then sometimes a few of the issues thereafter, is you get the main book, and then you get some back matter that isn't panel layout, and it's usually some kind of some type of prose written words, usually with some sort of like design that's going over it. And it's usually pretty clever. So that was there. I think there was a short afterward by Jim at the end of issue 4. But also by having to trade paperback, you missed the printed tweets, which is the equivalent of like a modern day letter section. And your boy got printed in issue number 4. It was my first technically ever printed review. So
nice.
That one was very special to me. And I actually had Jim when he was autographing that one. I had him autograph right by the tweet. So no, I haven't read the forward, and Rem has been like pretty quiet. He doesn't talk a ton about it, so I'd actually be very curious to see that. I'm probably going to break down and buy the trade at some point, because I can't really read my singles anymore now that they're autographed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, probably stored away, well sealed. But at least I have something to contribute. You probably have read those more than once, so I don't know if I'll share my opinion, but you probably have the deep dive there. Before we dive into both, like, what are you drinking? I know you're big on beer, and you probably have something, maybe not.
So a little background before we started recording. I was telling Torsten that this past weekend, my parents were in town. It was my daughter's 4th birthday. We've had a lot of people over. And then right before this, I took my daughter to the pool. So unfortunately, when it came time and I was going through and I was like, okay, what am I going to be drinking? The only beer we had left, because we had been drank out of everything else, was Summer Shandy. And I don't do fruit beer. So instead, I'm doing something much more manly and hardcore. And I have one of a number of hard seltzers that were left behind. We have a whole bunch of hard seltzer that apparently people are into, and all the good beer. And all bad beer too. I mean, even the just regular drinking beer has been taken up. So Yeah, it's the seltzer night. But what about you? What alt beer? What Dunkelweizen do we have for you,
No.
sir?
I try to stay away from that. I try to match it more with the books, and I would have said like I can edit out your walk to the fridge right now, but if you don't have anything in the fridge either, then
No, I have nothing but and not doing that.
So I have a Japanese sunrise ale kawaba in honor of Kaiju Score. I know the story isn't set in Japan, but like kaiju, like background origin, at least. Yeah. And I got it Dos Equis just for the Dos Equis
the cervezas. There's a point in there where one of the bottles that they drink, which I thought was pretty cool, is X-Men, and it's done like in the font of Dos Equis, and so it very much was clearly homaging. So that was a lot more thought than I put into it.
And their road trip, their road trip kicks off in Mexico, right? In
Mexico, yeah, that's where the Dos Equis bottle was. When Wolverine and Havok are talking in the bar, one of them has and they have a like Dos X-Men bottle of beer, which I thought was pretty clever.
Yeah, awesome. So. Do you want to plug real quick where your article about Kaiju Score was published? Because I know you wrote a whole review of that book.
So if you go to comicsaredope.com, I think there's an articles tab. I'm one of the what's called dope contributors. So I wrote both an article about Kaiju Score, and then I followed it up when we were leading up to the follow-up series, Kaiju Score Steal from the Gods. Did an interview with Jim that's up there as well. So you can find those two things at comicsaredope.com.
Nice. I'll put the link in the description. And I mean, there had to be something for you to write the article about this book. And I know you love it. You've been raving about it. So what makes this book so special for you? While I'm having the sip of this one.
So there's two different things for me that really made it. I mean, you hear about the premise, and it's they describe it, I think, as a Tarantino movie set within, while a Godzilla rampage is happening. And one of the things that wasn't immediately apparent with this until you start reading it is for me, so many comics these days are like genre mashups, and they described as it's X meets X, and it's just trying to have those two things go head on. And a lot of times I think the book is weaker for that because you don't give full focus. And as you come to read this, really attracted to this is, even though there's kaiju, there's big monster, and that's kind of the selling point, it's right in the name. The heart of this series is just a classic kaiju. Like, this is a crime comic through and through, which is typically my favorite genre of comic book. And it's just done so perfectly. In 4 issues, you have the setup, you have the heist. I mean, again, the whole point is that there's kaiju activity happening, and it looks awesome when it does. But that might as well, for the point of the story, have been the changing of the guard shift. Something is going on, and that's their opportunity. And I just thought that was such a clever idea. And I was just cleanly in 4 issues, get everything that's going, get that, all those classic tropes. You get the assembling of the crew, you get this, you get, the execution of it. And this thing doesn't quite go right, and just everything and it's just, feels so good while also being all that thing. I love that. And then all the while, Broo, who does the art on this one, it took a little while because it doesn't look like anything else on the stands. But as I grew up reading webcomics in the 2000s, it really in that, and specifically Pennycade, and it just gave it this sort of life and this fun energy to it that it's like, this is a fun comic, and it just like everything about it, it never takes itself too seriously. It tells a great classic crime story, but it does it while there are big monsters fighting. It knows what it is, and it's trying to have fun with comics, and that just so spoke to me that I, like I said, I had to write about it. I got to interview Jim about it. Anytime I've talked with him, he's always been like, "Thank you, that's what I was going for." And so just like this, sometimes you read a book and it's like, you get me. Jim gets me. So
awesome.
Moment of truth, Torsten.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I loved it. I really did love it.
Yes.
And I should say, like, for both books, like, big spoilers. I don't think we haven't started doing spoilers yet. You
wasn't sure how you wanted to go with that. So
yes, I forgot to say that in the beginning, just in case anyone doesn't want to be spoiled. Starting now, spoilers. I don't think you have revealed anything yet that any of the twists there. But no, I agree. The art, I love the art. Good stuff. You talked about let's see, like, even those, they are full of movement. Like the art is full of is dynamic, and to me, like, the criteria of a good story is, can you take that story, change the background, place it somewhere else, and it holds up, right? The kaiju are they're just a backdrop. They're not the core story. They're not driving the story or the plot. They're driving the plot a little bit, but not the story. You could remove the monsters, place that anywhere else with other characters that are having, different character design, but you have basically their characteristics and their behaviors, how the world building works, and world building not in terms of like what's the city, what does the city look like, but just environment, right? Like you have the core crew, you have the person that finances the gig, you have the inside man, and just the character arcs of almost all of the crew, and those are like basically the main characters. So Marco and Michelle, to me, being the core duo, the core characters, but then you have Black Cat, like Palmero, I guess, and Pearson, being the four main characters in here. They all have such great stories and arcs. They grow within just 4 issues, change how they interact, change how they behave, but it's all based in things that happen to them. So it's not just coming out of nowhere. And if you place that anywhere else, that would have been still a great story. So the kaiju part might be something that pulls you in, that makes it more interesting, but it's not the heart of the story, which would have been too gimmicky to me if there was all there was. Like, it was just a heist during a monster attack, and they try to fight through, and it's more action than not. Like, I'm a fan of stories that have strong characters in them, and this one is that. Like, this is one of the better stories I've read this year. I don't think anything of that is missing. I want to know where it's going. And I saw it, like, there's a second volume. I wasn't sure if that's like, if that stars the same characters. Obviously, 2 are gone. So spoilers, Black Cat and Pearson die. I assume then it's going to follow Marco and Michelle.
It actually follows, as you can see from here. It's after the end of it. So again, spoilers. At the very end of it, Michelle approaches Marco. She's putting together a crew and wants to know if he's in. And that's the end of it. Also, if we're doing spoilers, how good was that ending where it just flips it over? They complete the score. And then, and he's just like, I go and retire, with on a beach with a margarita. And you flip the page, and he's like, "It's a margarita didn't taste as good as I thought it was going to, and the sand burned my feet." And it was just this like perfect little, like, that nugget of noir that just no matter what happens, we live in an uncaring world, and even when you think you have what you're looking for, there's some answers. I love that ending.
It was set up perfectly. I don't know when they would set it up. Issue 2, like way before. So early in the story, they set up like how he wants to like retire, how like this is his last heist, and how he wants to get out. Then he actually does that as you described, and it's not how he had imagined it, and it's to me that feels like so many things. Like you imagine things you want to accomplish, whether that's personally or at work or the next milestone you want to take. But once you're there, you're like, well, you know what you put in there to get there, so it doesn't necessarily feel as like something was thrown to you, can celebrate it, but you worked towards it. You're there at the stage, but it always feels a little bit different than what you had imagined going in. So him getting to his goal, and it's like, well, that cannot be it. As you said, margarita doesn't taste as well. The goals are pretty, but it's not what fulfills him. Like he figures out through the story that what fulfills him is like, I guess, the planning, the heist, the adrenaline.
Yeah, and that I almost think is like a hallmark of a classic crime story. So when I've talked with Jim about this, his biggest inspiration is the Parker crime novels that Richard Stark wrote, which are absolutely love them. They start with The Hunter, which I think is probably the greatest American revenge story, and just sets off the whole series. And it's just such that classic crime bent that once you get into this world, everybody thinks it's just that one last job. That's such the trope, just one last job and I'm out. And you realize once you're sort of in that world, like there is no one last job. And it kind of sets it up for him. But actually, so again, going back to Kaiju Score, Steal from the Gods, this follows Michelle's crew. Marco is not on that. Right. And I love what he did with Michelle in this. When I talked with him about shifting the focus away, I was saying, like, do you get advantages with that? Are there any disadvantages that you sort of, you lose what you built up with Marco? And he was like, I really don't see there being any disadvantages. He said, when I was, plotting out Kaiju Score early, for a good portion of the time, I actually saw Michelle as the lead character there. And obviously, you talked about this as it being almost like two kind of co-lead characters, with Michelle's story really taking on a big focus there. So we get to see some of her. And in this one, Michelle comes out and is amazing. It just, like if she wasn't your first character from the first volume, you read this first issue and you're like, nope, retroactively, go back, change it. Michelle's my favorite. Yeah. And she's leading her own crew, and she is such an amazing, like, badass, but also like, she has basically imposter syndrome where, she's needing to put this out, but, she's got these questions. Can I do this? I need to put that brave face on out there. And just, it's honestly, I think, I don't know how well this works on its own without having read the first one. I think it works well as a good standalone, but I've got a buddy who's starting with this one and then going back, and he's like, he was saying specifically like the art direction was like taking a little bit for him. And I think if you have that first one, you kind of adapt with it. I think that gets a little bit easier, but honestly, so we're 3 issues into what's going to be a 4-issue miniseries. So far, Steal from the Gods is every bit as good as the first one there. Highly suggest when the trade for this comes out, you check it out.
I will, because I love this. And everyone should start here, even if they're interested just in Michelle's side. But no, her arc was just as good as Marco's. Like she started being fairly innocent. I mean, not as innocent as anyone else, because she's still part of a crew and doing illegal stuff. But she lost her real innocence when she was killing Gina. And then she grew into that role, had to do things she was not used to. And then she had to somewhat let go of her own self, take on that fake persona. And then, she realized in the end that process changed her for good. And then in the end, she's planning her own heist. And yeah, her journey makes sense, which is interesting. I mean, I want to talk a little bit more about this book, but you said that the books are completely different. I mean, you have a character in here too that like takes on a different persona. There's some similarities there though,
Okay.
but we can talk about that later. Yeah. There's something that James Patrick said in the foreword of the trade paperback, and he said he wanted the story to be like, he wanted to write a different story. He wanted to write a more down and dirty, like a score. It's still in the title, Kaiju Score, but he wanted to write a score, not a heist story. And then when he saw Rem's art, I think he said that all screwed it over, because he realized he couldn't do that like down and dirty job anymore. The dialogues had to be snappier, and the book had to have swagger. So it became a heist story. But that was interesting that he changed it based on the art.
Yeah, and I think you kind of see that too, where when he was describing in kind of the elevator pitch, he specifically refers to it as a Tarantino film that's set within there, when really he's more of sort of like a classic crime writer, more of that Parker Richard Stark. But, to your point, you don't get this art. You don't do this and then just, try and tell like a gritty noir story filled with like dark and whatnot. And speaking of that too, also in this volume, who's doing the colors on this? Rem's colors on this one. It's like, just, he takes a leap. The colors on this, so good, man. Yeah, like Rem's like, I love the art in the first one there, but I think Rem really kind of figured it out in that first volume. And when he came back to it, it's like, they know what they are. They kind of feel that teamwork again. Like they work very well.
Nice. And yeah, it's great to see an artist have that impact there, because my preconception always is that the writer is dictating the story, but it's not like that anymore. I think that those times have changed. I think that was maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. But I hear more and more artist-writer duos talking about how it's more of a back and forth instead of just I mean, it always depends on who the writer is. So if he's giving the artist a script that is super detailed and allows no deviation, but when talking to Ram or when listening to Scott Snyder, like I think Scott Snyder mentioned that throughout his Batman run, he had to learn how to let go of dictating the art to Greg Capullo, and had him let him do his own thing, because then he realized like the full potential that an artist can bring to the table. And it's good to see that, yeah, here Rem's art is changing the story. It's changing how the story is being told. Otherwise, I would agree, it would have not matched up. Like that art with a gritty story, it doesn't work probably.
Yeah, it's I was talking to a buddy, and it's just like, I don't know. This is probably not a great comparison, but like the sort of energy that I kind of get from it is like a Cowboy Bebop a little bit, where it's like, I hear this like fast paced jazz and like up tempo, like that's going on through this. And it's just like this fun, vibrant world that's constantly moving, which again, very different from sort of that inspiration. Like you look at the Darwin Cook Parker collections, his Martini editions, like those are very particularly stylized, the same as Rem, but they go in a very different direction. And it's just, there's some similarities I think you could kind of look to with the representation that Rem does with Darwin, where it's like neither of them are hyper realistic artists where they're both very stylized. They sort of capture people in their own way, but I think they took it in very different poles. And I think the book is better for that.
Well, it was interesting. So in the afterword, or like in the extras, Rem talks about how he got the script and how he expected and had hoped for Pearson to turn good, and he didn't want Black Cat or Pearson to die.
I did not want Black Cat to. That was.
Yeah.
I mean,
do you think that? I don't think that would have been a better ending.
No, I loved him. I was so sad about that.
So would you have preferred that ending over what we got? I think it works perfectly.
Yeah, and again, like that's the whole thing as the reader is like you want, as you're reading it, you want, you feel that tension. You're like, oh, how are they going to get out of this? And you want Marco to go to that beach with the margarita that tastes perfect, like, because you're rooting for these guys as it's happening. Because you kind of, I don't know about you, but like you kind of put yourself in that story, and it's just like, oh, like we need for this to happen. And anytime, like a good story, at least, if it's got you in there, you want everything to come out along, with that. And, the mark of the fact that I wanted Black Cat to go there and was sad when it happened, I think is good storytelling. But no, the story would have been weaker for that. It just, I loved him, and just like that.
But it comes down to like what you said, like the threat has to be real for it to feel that, to have that pacing, for the reader to feel the urgency. And it's not necessarily coming through the kaiju threat, right? It's more Pearson that's driving them to where they're going. It's more the internal threat within the crew, or what's his name, Blackie, I believe.
The bankroller.
Yeah, the guy that finances it. They're like constantly threatened by like, if this goes bad, like we can save our lives, but what do we gain? Because then this guy will kill us. So they have to stick through, and the threat comes more from from the guy that sits in the background, threatening with Pearson to kill them all, and then Pearson wanting to do his own thing. Like that's another twist that's in there. And there are threats all over the place, and the kaiju are probably at some point the least threat. Like they're there, but like Marco learns also how to communicate.
Oh yeah, I mean, like he uses that as the whole, like, to his advantage, and it's like that whole thing. Marco going into it, his whole flaw is that there's always that one aspect he didn't count for. And in this case, it's his hyper planning towards the kaiju that actually like allows him to kind of adapt and use that to his advantage and help them get out. And that's part of his arc, right? Because he's learning, like he used to neglect the details, but now through this story, he's learning to improve and to pay attention to details, trust in his abilities. And there's always luck involved. But still, if you control what you can control, like, he learns to do that. And then he gets frustrated when he realizes it could go wrong, even though he thought of everything. But then there's got to be luck. There's a train going. Can you hear that on there?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. I just realized the window was open. So, okay, cool.
All good. No, I can edit that out. That stuff is good, by the way. Should try to find it.
I will definitely take a look. I think I told you that. What's the brewery on that one?
Sunrise Ale. It's an Amber Ale, Kawaba.
Is it?
This show is not sponsored by Kawaba,
but it could be. So who's the brewery on that? So Kawaba, I assume, is the name of the beer.
Imported. No, it's an imported. Brewed and bottled by Dennen Plaza Kawaba in Gunma, Japan. So I think it's an imported Japanese beer, and Kawaba seems to be the brewery. Sunrise Ale, just the style.
I'm thinking that that's probably something, because the first thing that comes up is Total Wine, which I think is out by you guys. American Amber. Keegan? Okay. Well, I can get it in Allen, Texas, apparently.
Nice. So it's just a short drive.
Yeah. So that'll be something we check out afterwards. But yeah, I love this book. I love the series. I've read some of Jim's other work. I like his other stuff. I think he did a really clever kind of genre twist Campisi, the Dragons incident, and he's got a few others that are kind of cool concepts. He's got another one, Astronaut Down. But I think that this so far has been just his tightest execution. So I definitely highly suggest everybody out there, if anything that we're saying sounds somewhat interesting, check it out. From Aftershock, Kaiju Score. Mwah. Chef's kiss.
If you had to give that a score, Kaiju Score, out of 10, what would that be?
My score, like a 20 out of 10, like a Mugara out of 10. I love this book. Like I said, I can't be objective about it. If I was trying to be, honestly, the lowest I would go is a 9 out of 10. I think it does so many things so well. Yeah. So with that, do you want to talk a little bit about Havok and Wolverine?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So the second book, Havok and Wolverine, Meltdown, in that omnibus. I have that too. I haven't opened it yet. It's still sealed.
You have Wolverine Volume 2?
Yeah, I got a good deal on that. So I figured
cool.
let's just, for the backlog. The backlog's piling up.
Yeah. I literally, so real quick before we actually go into it, one of the reasons you have that, again, because I knew I was actually buying you the book. I had purchased that recently because Omar had talked about it and how he really pushed for that to be in Wolverine Volume 2. I'm not a huge X-Men guy. I didn't have Wolverine Volume 1. And I've been, I'm a big fan of OPB Whatnots, and I've been buying some damage lots. And I had one box that had been down there for a while, and I was originally going to do an unboxing video, and then I didn't because, I'm bad at doing things like that. And then literally by the time I opened it up, I was like, oh, after, so I had purchased the box before, and then I bought that copy that you're holding of Havok Wolverine Meltdown. And then I opened it up and I was like, oh, well, I have that in there. And I bought, and so I was like, well, I guess you're getting that. So cool. All right. Well, maybe you can pass that on to somebody else and share the love there.
Share the love. Yeah. No, I love, so this is a standalone story. Like, you don't have to have read anything prior or after, I guess, of X-Men. I used not to be a good X-Men reader. I read a couple of standalones, some issues here and there. I haven't read a complete X-Men run, and not from that era either. So going in, I was like, well, do I need to know anything else? But I figured it was going to be a standalone. And it was like, you have to, maybe it would be good to know who Wolverine and who Havok are, but I guess that should be a given. That's pop culture at this point. I don't think you even need to. Like they make it's explained in the first issue.
It's explained in every issue. Like, this is still the era where like they weren't writing for the trade and they didn't assume that you had that. So like every issue features that whole like little bit where like the character's thinking and they're basically giving exposition and just like, oh, he's got healing factor. Oh, he absorbs radiation.
Yeah. And if Kaiju Score is a heist story, this is like a chase story. Like it's I don't know how many, I've stopped counting, but they visited multiple. I mean, it started off in Mexico. It reminds me, got to open Dos Equis. But they're starting out in Mexico. But there's also Ukraine, and so it opens up with Chernobyl, right? And that, to me, just like the first few pages of the retelling and kind of interpretation. I mean, it could have happened like that. Like, who knows? Yeah. They're not alive anymore to tell. All they know about Chernobyl was that
a little grim, but it
blew up during a test. They were understaffed and poorly trained, and no one knows more about that because it blew up. It's just so interesting to me to tie that into a book, and you can tell like this was like, when was this written? I think in '88. So Chernobyl.
Was it real? I figured it was early '90s, but I bet I did not look it up. So
I think I looked when the first issue, I think it was 88.
88. No, you are exactly right. Okay.
So that's 2 years. 2 years after Chernobyl. So this is like highly, like for that time, highly relevant. Imagine living in those. Now, this is like as if nowadays there's a comic coming out like covering the COVID pandemic that ties in events of the, like, how did the virus start? We are tying this into a comic and the origin story. There could be a villain behind this. Like
it's also during the Gorbachev era in Russia, but it's before, the fall of the Berlin Wall.
It's 1 year before the fall. But Gorbachev already started the.
You still have perestroika, you still have glasnost that are going. And I mean, I think actually they even mentioned at one point perestroika and how like they're opposing that. But yeah, and as someone who has taken a weirdly large amount of Russian history courses and is kind of fascinated by that, weirdest flex ever, I guess. I don't, but not supposed to be.
No, don't worry about that.
But yeah, like I love that idea that they gave it, the story, this backdrop. And I actually thought one of the most interesting things about the story was those first few pages where you get that chess match going, like as the backdrop of what's going on there. We don't see General Meltdown and what's going on. It's these shadowy figures, and it looks like it's going to be this geopolitical intrigue story, which I was super into.
Yeah.
And it to your point, ended up being more of a chase story, but like that's the backdrop for it.
That's the backdrop. And I mean, that area always hits close to home for me. So me growing up in Germany, I grew up when the wall was there. Like the wall came down when I was 7. And I lived in Berlin. And I remember my parents like telling me, like, when you were little, we couldn't give you any milk because of Chernobyl, because the thing blew up and the radiation in the rain, like everyone was afraid of acid rain. Radiation in the rain was basically coming down all over Europe, falling on the grass, the cows eating the grass. And everyone was like, well, you can't drink milk anymore for a few years because there might be radiation. I mean, I don't know if there was overreaction or if there was a valid argument. I haven't put any more research into that, but that's basically what my parents were told when I was 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And having that impact on your life, like when you're a kid, because of something like Chernobyl, our kids will grow up like, oh, well, remember, like we had a huge impact on our life when COVID hit. So this is like that tying into the story at the time it was happening, or shortly after, 2 years after it actually happened, with Glasnost, that obviously they couldn't probably foresee. I don't know how during those times, if you could tell that, well, the Soviet Union was falling apart. To my knowledge, it kind of happened more suddenly. There were signs, but when it actually happened, no one saw it really coming. So to set that story right in between, right a year before, the Berlin Wall came down, and the Soviet Union a year after fell apart. I think that historically this story has value in that regards. Such just like Watchmen, like being set or like written in 86. I think the late 80s were kind of, if you picked up the topic of atomic war, Soviet Union, I think they have historic value.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, the backdrop, when you were talking about Kaiju Score about this, like the backdrop is important and it sets up the story, but a good story has to supersede that. And one of the reasons that Watchmen is so timeless is, yes, it's very much a story of that time, but you could write Watchmen today. And I mean, I think they did a little bit of that with the HBO series, and those themes are basically ever present. And if it's not, America versus the Soviet Union, you still have superpower X versus superpower Y, threats against personal liberties and everything that's going on with that. Like, that's just a very big theme. And so again, at this point, it's not necessarily the fall of the Soviet Union. It's more of Gorbachev westernizing the country, introducing first perestroika and then glasnost, and allowing not necessarily democracy, but sort of lifting away the restraints that have been put on the people traditionally there. And then you see sort of Hungary start breaking away, and you see the fragmentation that's happening there. But I mean, Gorbachev, even before everything fell, Gorbachev was trying to westernize the country and start bringing a little bit more of that influence to the people. And obviously there's a huge backlash against it. And we see that with the two actors, playing chess behind there. And that's kind of the whole motivation of them, is to take back the Soviet Union and to restore what was being taken away. And again, without trying to get political here, but the idea of, a people who have typically been in power and are seeing that power taken away or threatened by that is kind of pretty present now. And I mean, you can pretty much go throughout, and like, powerful people want to keep holding power. So yeah. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and then them representing the hardliners, Dr. Neutron and General Meltdown, and you have that link. Like 34 years later, now you still have that. Putin is one of those hardliners. Like, he came out of that area, and he still like imagines his old Soviet Union back and tries to take Ukraine now. And
long before that, there was the trade bloc that was established. It's Mm-hmm.
So this story is still relevant. Like it still hardliners trying to get where Meltdown and Neutron tried to get in that story 34 years later, which makes me wonder what happens 34 years from now, right? Like that's I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about, like, what scares him the most is not what we know now. It's like what we don't know. Like, if you think of people and like in 1900, like their fear was completely different to the people in the 2000s. What was their fear? Like, suddenly you had the fear of not only atomic war, like first, I guess, nuclear war, and then you had nuclear power plants blowing up. And it didn't stop with Chernobyl, obviously. We had that in Japan, was it must have been 15, 20 years ago. And Germany actually this year is shutting down the last two remaining nuclear power plants, just based on the fallout of the disaster in Japan back then. And it took them that long, but this year they're switching it off. So it's still the fear of nuclear power plants blowing up. I wonder, like, what's the fear in 100 years from now, right? There's going to be some of the topics that we have right now, but who knows what's going to be around then. And just that threat emerging with Chernobyl blowing up is like, still relevant, because there are still nuclear power plants all over, and we see every now and then how safe they are. But let's talk about the story before we go down that rabbit hole too much.
That's an interesting topic, but I don't know that that's one I want to have in the backdrop of a comic book story.
We just lost our last two remaining viewers.
The comment section is real fun right now, and just like, oh, all right, cool. This is the internet, huh?
But with Kaiju Score, you could have removed the kaiju, and it would have been would have held up. I don't know if it's actually the same here. If you removed, I mean, you could have placed it in a different era with a different threat, but you had to have the nuclear threat there. Just how Havok gains the power, how he could have transmitted his powers to General Meltdown. If you strip that all away, what remains is like a chase story, which is still a chase story with like a spy inserted in Quark, like Scarlet, and like that love story that is a misconception maybe on Alex's side, but it's if you strip all of the surroundings away, does it still hold up? I think the story here, like other than Kaiju Score, loses a little bit if you strip all of the background away.
I think there's some elements that you could take away because, again, we just talked about how the whole idea of a group in power who sees that power waning, historically will make grabs to retain that power. So, I mean, whether it's the fall of the Soviet Union, whether it's an American political party, whether it's the last days of Rome, just that I think is very universal. But when you're telling a very particular superhero story and it's centered around one of those characters' powers, that does kind of pigeonhole it. I mean, if you took away Havok and it was, I'm bad at X-Men, but maybe it was Cyclops and it was something about the sun. Like, I think there are ways that you can still tell the general outline of the story, but it doesn't translate as well. Like, this story kind of, in this form, needed to have some specific pieces. And spoiler alert, I think it was a little bit weaker than what we were talking about. And so to your point about that, like, a good story has to be transportable. Some aspects of this is. I don't think the majority of it is.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a little bit weaker. It's not a weak story. To me, Kaiju Score was like 8.5, 9 out of 10. This is probably an 8 out of 10. But yeah, I like the tie-ins to the chess match. It's Meltdown and Neutron trying to outsmart Wolverine and Havok, and then that doesn't work, and Scarlet kind of falls victim to that game. But it's somewhat predictable, and maybe some of that comes from Omar keeps calling it Havok versus Wolverine Meltdown. I was like, well, if he puts the verses in there. I think maybe you mentioned it once, but in my mind, when you sent me the book, I was like, oh, Havok and Wolverine. It doesn't say versus. Someone said versus, and I'm pretty sure it was Omar. But I was like, oh, they're gonna fight at some point. And obviously they did. And
two superheroes fight when they come together? I've never heard of that before.
So it might be. I love the tie-ins. I love the historic relevancy. The chase story itself is fun. I think the twists are too predictable, though. I mean, they're not even trying to hide the twists too much. Scarlet, like they don't even try to hide Scarlet being like the agent that tries to manipulate Havok, and then you can see that from the beginning. And then when Havok buries Wolverine, like she's saying like, "Oh, this is a little bit shallow here. Like, you don't want to bury him deeper. You can." Well, that means he prepares him to get out.
Yeah, and then before that, she's just like, "Are you sure he's dead? Trust me, he's dead." And like all throughout before that, like the entire story has told you, guess what? He's never dead. I think it's almost a little bit of a misnomer to call them twists. Like it just seems like twists. Yeah. No, it seems like they were thrown in. Real quick, I'm using only natural light here in my background, and I can see it's getting a little bit darker. You want
it looks good. Up to you. It looks good.
I look very spectral right now.
If you tried to blur your background earlier, that's been achieved now.
Yeah, that was it. Okay, cool. And just like I said, I know I'm getting a little bit darker and a little bit faded. So I'm very happy to look spectral. All right, please.
Yeah,
continue.
Oh, good. This book lives a lot from its art, and I believe it's even said in here, like the afterword by Louise and Walter Simonson. They describe how this actually started with the artists, that the artists wanted to write a story about Havok and Wolverine, and they were trying to find a story that they could put their art in, and then Walter and Louise, being a huge fan, being fans of Muth and Williams, had no second thoughts and accepted the gig. So the story really came together because of the artists having that idea, and they had to find a story that matches their art style. How do you feel about the art?
So I really liked the art. It reminded me very much of David Mack art, and I have it's super stylized, obviously. There's nothing really that kind of looks like this. And
except for one picture on one page where the tire prints. I think they took an actually realistic picture photograph.
Yeah. But one of the things I think too that's really interesting is that for this, you mentioned two different artists and typically go, oh, okay, one's the penciler, one's the inker. Not the case. Muth here is the Havok artist and the Wolverine artist is Williams. And so, they actually had, they kind of went for that same thing that if you read Strange Adventures, they did the Tom King book where, they had Doc Shaner and Mitch Gerards telling two different parts of the story. And I think that works really well here. There are a few times where things are a little bit too stylized for me. Like I sometimes have an issue where comic interior art looks way too much just like an adapted picture. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Joker Harley Criminal Sanity. And the first part of that, when it's and I can't remember what artist is on that. All I can remember is Kama Garcia was the writer. But like in the first part of that, all it looks like is basically just like still photos that someone then went over either with a filter or just drew. And it's like, it has this sort of dead look to it. But with this one, there's enough that's going on with those pictures that obviously, like I'm guessing every single frame here probably had some type of like photo that a person was like drawing. I would be super interested to see the artistic background before this. But I mean, you look at like this page right here, and like you can see, I'm very bad at finding the camera. Yep. There we go. But like you can see, right, I was actually going for that section. Like you can see the brush strokes that are going into that. Like this is real art. Like, and I love that about it. It doesn't look like anything else, and I appreciate that about it. But I totally get how someone might not feel the same way. So Torsten, how do you feel about the art?
I felt about, I for the most part, I liked it. What I hated
is Wolverine's little
his hairstyle. Like, come on, like that is.
Yep.
It's like a harlequin.
It's like 100%. Yeah,
that was horrible.
That was very silly looking. And then there's one part that goes with that too.
And I think it changes towards the end, though. It's only in issue 1 and 2. Like he doesn't look like that anymore in issue 4. So maybe they realized it as well.
Well, there's also one, I can't remember if it's part of issue 2 or 3, but there's a part where after a bomb blast, there's this like 2-page spread and Wolverine is like yelling, "Rah!" Oh, okay, right here. So right there.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't.
That just, his name is Wolverine, and I swear they tried to make him look like a ram.
A
like
ram
right
or donkey or goat or something.
It's just like he's got that slanted face, he's got the curved horns going behind there, and it's just like again, it's a very cool image, but it just doesn't necessarily look like it's supposed to.
And then like issue 3 and 4, they move away a little bit from that. So he has proper hair, not like this clown-ish kind of. But this art, so what it reminds me of is an art, I don't know how to pronounce it, blue and green. And obviously,
with an under K doing that like painted style.
Yeah, that jazzy style. Obviously, that's a jazz book or like inspired by jazz. This one isn't, but the art is fairly similar. Obviously, blue and green, one in Eisner for the art. I don't know about Meltdown, but yeah, I like the art. It was very dynamic, but in some, yeah, I don't know. Some cases it didn't work on some pages. It didn't always work for the story.
How do you feel about David Mack as an artist, as a modern artist? Because I feel like he had to be really inspired by this.
I'm not sure what he I can't recall having read anything.
Well, he did a number of covers for a little book called Layla Starr, you may have heard of.
The covers? I thought didn't.
No. Felipe Andrade did the main covers. Some of the special variants.
The variants, I like the variants.
Did you okay, so like Alias, did you read Alias?
I didn't read it. I have it here, but I think I'm familiar with most of the covers. I like that style. I like that style probably a little bit.
Well, that's Maleev did the interiors. All right, never mind. It's he is an artist that is very much that sort of like painted, almost photorealistic, but like very filtered on it, and like he incorporates a lot of like words that are like going down through there. That just so like as I was.
How Scarlet is portrayed through this, because I think, which actually works fairly well. And if my camera could focus.
Yeah, but, like that. So that painted style, that feels very much like I'm looking at that and like, oh, this is like what an early David Mack would be.
Yeah. And Scarlet is like way more realistic. And I like that they changed it for her, because she's supposed to stand out.
Part of the Havok art. And I think just Havok's artist, he was
but
going
even
for the
Havok being drawn, still Havok in those scenes is drawn a little bit, like I think differently. Maybe I not knowing that like the artists were actually taking turns on characters. It felt to me just that Scarlet stood out more than Havok. But it made sense because she was supposed to be like the pretty one, the beauty that Havok gets. Like I don't know. Yeah, he's more in the. But I
mean, like you look at let's do art here, right here. Like if you look at that picture of the two of them, like right there.
They're fairly similar in that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is just sort of, I think part of that is just there's more defining features to Scarlet, like Havok / Alex. Well, I guess when Havok is Alex, like it's a pretty straightforward design. It's like white dude with brown hair. When he's Havok, obviously there's costume aspects, there's more things to that, but Scarlet, she's a little bit more of a dynamic figure. And so I think there's just a little bit more to draw with her. Like you've got the pouty red lips, you've got the flowing red hair that goes with that. Whereas like Alex, it's like, he's a white dude with brown hair.
Yeah. She has more features, like standout features. Yeah. I would agree. But yeah, I like the book. It was a fun read.
I feel like I like the book, but I feel like the book was, and we, kind of tying back to Kaiju Score, I think this is a book that pulls in a few too many directions. And even with each issue being like oversized, I feel like this should have been like a run of a Wolverine series instead of just like that 4 prestige issue format, like because it tried to be a political intrigue series. It tried to be a buddy cop, like 2 guys go down to Mexico, and honestly, like I love the 2 of them in that like first bar fight where they've got that bet going.
That's how I got the book. Like
I know.
So I love them.
Two buddies doing a bet. Yeah, like
almost like you almost like you handpicked that book.
It's almost like it. But and then like. And then again, like it ends up being that chase. It ends up like and then there's the mind control aspect where it's like it's a spy thriller. I think this book. I like this book again. I don't. I'm not objective about Kaiju Score. Kaiju Score scores a 20 out of 10. but like, I think that's a good example where like the Kaiju Score knows what it was trying to do. Patrick saw Broo's art and like kind of adapted it. And here, you talk about how they wrote a story around the art, and the story like kind of exists to showcase what they want to do, but it goes in a bunch of different directions. Some of the times the chase is like really silly. And also that final showdown with General Meltdown, like,
you could tell, like, you didn't even have to finish the book to know what was going to happen, and exactly that was happening. Like, you knew how that's going to end.
The Simonsons like put that in there because they're like, all right, we need a big climactic finish, but like they didn't want to put that in there, and you can tell on the page. Like I generally, like, I love my books to be a little bit more talky. I would have been fine without that. And
skipped.
Yeah. And like, honestly, I think they were like that. They're like, yeah. We got to do a climactic finish. Okay, here you go. A few pages. Boom. Throw some rods. We're done. All right, move on.
Got to wrap it up. But then I did like Dr. Neutron I think there's only 2 pages, the epilogue, when he pulls out his other chest. Like, and he has the Punisher, Daredevil, Captain America, Spider-Man in here.
Yeah. And you get the female that you can't ever see. And it starts that new game. I thought he was so much more of a compelling villain. Also, the General Meltdown character design. What was that?
I couldn't even, like, the first time he was shown, I was like, it's a cool image. And then second time he was shown, he looked completely different. I was like, is that the same?
He looks like a weird frog man. I
liked the first image. I liked this general design, but yeah, when they showed him the second time, it looked completely different. There could have been, again, the 2 different artists. I don't know, but I think it was also on the next page. So I don't know how often they switched between the 2, but to me, it was more like, here. So going from this to then this, it's like, is this the same guy?
Well, but that, like, the weirdly pronounced chin, the like weird hulking lumber, like, if I think it's fine if that is your design for the thinking man behind the scenes who's not supposed to be the action, like.
But he's not, right? Like, I like that they saved it in the end, because then it turns out that Dr. Neutron is the thinker behind it.
Totally. I would love, like, going from this, I'm like, oh, what else was Neutron in? Like, I want to see.
Like, that would have been one of my questions. Nope. Do you know if he's in any other stories or just disappears?
I do not. If he's in anything, it's very limited, because he is. I've never heard, even in the context of like people talking about this story, like nobody talks about Dr. Neutron. And again,
the Soviet Union fell apart. His arc is kind of like, well, now maybe nowadays it comes back. It's like maybe it could be Putin's advice.
See, I even disagree about that, because like, so again, going back, you talked about like the hallmark of like of a good story being that idea that you can remove the story and from like its current setting and put it somewhere else. Does it still work? And I am a firm believer in what you're saying, and it's one of the reasons that like I choose my Star Wars franchises now. I used to love Star Wars. I still love Star Wars, but I'm like very choosy about it. And like the Mandalorian is my favorite series because of that exact theory where it's like you could take the story of the Mandalorian, like at its heart, it's a great Western. And, they took a great Western story and they put it into Star Wars and it still works. There's a character, I guess he's in the main universe now, but he was in like the extended universe called General Thrawn. And Thrawn was this guy who after Return of the Jedi, after the Death Star blows up, and the Empire is gone, and supposedly the rebels win and everything. He's a guy who was with the Empire, who, even though it's been destroyed and isn't in power, he's like, his story is like still like him being like, just because you say the Empire is gone doesn't mean it is. And it's like his quest for that. And he's this amazing villain. Like, he is one of the best Star Wars villains, so much to the point that like they said everything that's extended universe doesn't exist. But we're going to write a Thrawn novel for this. And so again,
he was brought back. So Thrawn, that's what I love. One of the good decisions they did. They're just a few, but one of the great decisions that Disney made was bring Timothy Thrawn back to write about Thrawn, give him an origin, not only him, but the whole Chiss ascendancy stuff. Like, I 100% agree. Like this character, like he needed to survive the Disney, like the retconning of everything what came before, the whole legend stuff. But, and I'm so glad that he's still like around and stronger than ever. I think he's going to be in this Ahsoka series as well, because she already like name dropped him in The Mandalorian, right?
Yeah, that I never watched Clone Wars, and I guess he was in that, but
he was in Rebels,
or Rebels, I guess. Sorry, I'm very choosy about my Star Wars franchise at this point. I'm dealing with a lot of Star Wars fatigue. But that was a really cool moment for me when, as part of that, Ahsoka was like, "Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn, General Thrawn?" I can't remember.
Going next, and she's like, "Well, I'm going to look for Thrawn." Like, Grand Admiral.
Yeah, and I was like, "Yay, go find Thrawn!" But again, like I totally, and I don't think it ever happened, but I could definitely see. As part of this, Dr. Neutron being this like power broker where it's just like, oh my dear, the Soviet Union never died. The Soviet Union is an idea, and ideas can't die. Just because Mikhail Gorbachev says that it doesn't exist doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the hearts of all of us who stay loyal. And it's like he leads this faction of like people who are trying to restore. Yeah, something like that. Like he is. Just this behind-the-scenes power broker. Like that's a character that can exist whether or not the Soviet Union is still going. But I think I don't know how much of this story, and Omar kind of alluded to this a little bit, where because this was a mature rating series, it hasn't really been sort of fully adapted into the full Marvel universe. In fact, he had to like really fight to get it into Omnibus number 2.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if that kind of, and also I don't know how big of a, like 4-issue prestige formats don't generally tend to have like huge lasting formats. So I don't know of him being anything else. And I think that's a shame because again, like, I love that character is like a power broker behind the scenes who's like manipulating things. And like, I love that trope where it's like the villain falls and it's like, oh, that's fine. He was only someone I was using. I've got other plans. And it's just like that Xanatos thing where it's plans within plans. Like I such a sucker for that. So I would love to see more of him. I thought he was the much more compelling character than General Meltdown.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And I feel like there's so much opportunity for him to come back. So I hope someone will pick him up at some point.
Does Dr. Neutron from Meltdown show up in any other story, or has he disappeared?
Scarlet shows up in Age of Apocalypse. That was a nice little thing. And that was my argument for adding the Meltdown story in Wolverine Omnibus Volume 2. I said, David, Scarlet shows up in Age of Apocalypse. You're reprinting that. People are going to be like, who's this character if they don't see her in the Wolverine Havok Meltdown story? That was the beginning of my argument for that. And they ended up adding it, which was great.
Again, maybe it gets some new attention with it being included in the omnibus and some writer rereading the story. That's how that works, right? Like writers also read the stories and then they're like, that was a great character. Let's bring him back.
That was the entire Hickman run. Is it just like him like looking at plot points from the old Uncanny and being like, what if that's cool? No one did anything with that, huh? What if we did all of that? So like, and from what I hear, and I'm not current on my X-Men, but I guess from like the current run, Kieran Gillen on Immortal X-Men, he's the one who's kind of taking that like political bent with the X-Men. So I don't know, maybe as soon as I get done here, I'll go tweet incessantly at Kieran Gillen, bring back General Meltdown as like a power
create
broker.
a hashtag.
Like,
hashtag bring back Meltdown. Neutron. Sorry.
Like,
Bring
yeah,
back
you and I
Neutron.
will be the only one tweeting it, but we'll have that
My
going.
Twitter account that is only there so I can read tweets.
Oh, mine is
I'm so
literally
dead.
there so that I can tweet about indie comic books I like and feel validated when creators like my tweets or retweet it. Like that is the purpose of my Twitter. I don't think I have a single non-comic book tweet.
Yeah, I just use it so I can read stuff. I don't tweet, retweet, comment, anything. I just like whenever I click on a link that leads to a tweet, I have to have an account. It's kind of unfortunate, but that's what my account is for. So when I follow a link, I can actually get there.
That's what my Instagram is. It's like literally there's like no content. I follow only organic price books, and it's just like because they did that change where it's like once Facebook took them over, if you like click more than one thing, it's like, oh, you want to get further, you got to see this. Damn it. Yeah. So I technically have an Instagram and I weirdly have a few followers, and I'm just like, I want to tell like, don't follow me.
Don't follow me. Don't do that.
Yeah, that's like this is not a good like. Don't you have better things to do with your life? But like, then that also have to be like, I would use it. And then it's like, oh, well, clearly you're using Instagram to do this. And like, damn it, you got me there.
You can be that sleeper cell that no one knows what's up with you. And then like 5 years from now, you just post something and everyone that followed you 10 years back will be like, oh, that still exists. Whatever you want to post.
I remember he used to shout a whole lot about the question on Discord, and for some reason I thought it'd be a good idea to see if that username was on Instagram. No, he's got some wild ideas. I don't know if I approve of those, but let me click further. There you go. I'm maybe this whole time the reason we haven't heard about Dr. Neutron is because I inherited the mantle. And
there
I'm playing the long game.
You got to become a writer and write a story about him.
Oh, no. I'm just saying in my personal life, I just that sounds like a lot of work. What you're saying there, like submitting a spec script. I don't want to do that. No. Just political manipulation in the real world seems way easier these days.
Real life,
I'm only half joking about that.
That being said, I'd love to have the chess set with all the Marvel characters. That'd be a good idea if anyone at Disney is listening. But yeah. Final question. Have you by now read Day Tripper?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't.
Do you have the book? Because I think that would have been the book. You do. You purchased it by now. I was debating when we were going back and forth. It's like, that would have been a book I wanted to send you. But then we were like going, I think, back and forth a year ago on that. And I was like, he probably picked it up by now. Like, how can he not?
I held off for so long because I think, like I told you, I love Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon's artwork, and I wanted to find either the deluxe or the absolute. And I'm a notorious cheapskate. Like I joke that I'm allergic to paying cover price, and so like when I was first looking at it, it was like it wasn't listed on IST or anything like that, and so like the cheapest I could find it was like $80 on a $100 price tag, and I should have grabbed it at that point. And it was like, I don't know, I bet I can find it cheaper. I'll just, so like I still have an eBay alert for when it goes up, and I kept like waiting for that like $50 copy to go up, and then obviously it didn't happen. It went out of print. So
I think you should put a wish list alert on CGN, because I think DC does silent restocks on that. That's how I got my absolute. I think for like, I read the trade paperback and 2 issues in. I was like, should I got to get the absolute first of all, and second, should I stop and wait for the absolute, because I got like $60 on CGN, I think. And I couldn't stop, so I read the trade paperback before and was done before the absolute arrived.
I did break down one. Finally, I was like, oh, I waited too long. I did break down. I bought the trade paperback, but it was one of those, like, I bought it. I was super excited to have it. I put it in the bookshelf, and I did not read it. But in honor of this talk right now, I commit to you, I will read it tomorrow.
There you go. And I promise you, once you start it, you cannot put it down. So it'll 12 issues is a bit much for one session, but maybe if
I'm
you're not getting distracted.
I'm a great lover of dad books, and again, this is, I love the artwork. I know that, and it just like it's one of those books I already know. Like, this is going to resonate deeply with me. I'm going to feel very deeply. You're going to get some like Discord pings because I'm like, I just read this and I need to talk with it about people, and people will be like, yeah, that came out like 15 years ago. I already talked about it. It's good. Like, I had my conversation. I'd be like, no, I just experienced this. I need to talk about it. But yes, it was one of the, like,
feel free to ping me anytime. If I'm awake, I'll respond. But that's how I felt about the book too. Like, when I read it, it was also like, not when it came out, like it had been out at that point, probably for 5, 6, 7 years already. I don't know. It must have been a few years ago. But yeah, I went on like, well, I want to know more about it. Like, want to find people that have read it and love it and talk about it. It's when I went to, I don't know if you know the YouTube channel. I think right after Near Mint Condition, that's probably the channel I watch the most, is For the Love of Comics. It's,
I don't.
When Near Mint Condition is the non-spoiler review, he's more on the spoiler review, with like deep thoughts into each story. He spends hours just elaborating a single story. So it's great stuff. But like, he had a video about it, and I was like commenting it, and he came back to me right away. He's in India, so he like responded overnight. I went back the night after. So it's like was good, like exchange of thoughts, and I think that's what this community is all about.
Did he? Was he on the I think he was on off my shelves, who's one of the mentees.
Yeah, he did one segment
on the Dark Horse one.
Yeah, he did part of that.
I remember like hearing him and I'd be like, this guy is super passionate, and he talks in the way about comics that I like hearing people talk. And then I'm just like, it just kind of like slipped from my mind. And I was like, all right, I forgot about this.
Yeah, and he did that segment, and he posted a separate video on his channel that was like 20 minutes long. It's like, this guy asked me for a few thoughts and reduced it to like 1 minute, 2 minutes. He's like, every one of my viewers knows I can't do that. So he did a 20-minute video.
That's a man after my own heart right there.
Posted it on his own. He's like, here, you got the 2-minute snippet here, but I got to talk about it more. So that was good. He does like 3-hour videos of just reviewing, like, hey, all the Eisner, like all the Eisner winners. What was it? Documentary, like reality-based Eisner Award winners since of all time, and he went through all the books and how many he's read, and like review of all of them. Was like a 3-hour video. Was great. But yeah, it was fun talking to you about those books.
Hey, this has been super fun. What are you reading right now, Torsten?
I just finished those too, so I actually I didn't have to interrupt any of my other books. What I'm going into next, and I'm dreading it a little bit because man, it sucks. Hawkman Silver Age.
Oh yeah, I saw that you picked those, and I was just like, buddy, what are you doing with your life?
Volume 2, Volume 1 is like probably one of the worst reads this year. But you posted that picture where she was like, if he puts that finger on my ring, he'll be married to me. And I can't get out of this engagement because she puts the finger on her own ring, or like something like that. It's like there's worse stuff in there, way worse
Shaira
stuff.
in the background is like, he's too smart for that, and it's like, dude, eject, don't do this.
It's like she's saying something like, oh, you would like if like I helped you with that, and he responds, he meaning Carter Hall, like Hawkman. It's like, no, I would like it better if you make me a sandwich right now.
Again,
Silver Age, right? But
all right. Did you read the I think it was the most recent Hawkman run. I believe Robert Venditti did it.
Yeah, I love that. I have so many thoughts about that. I haven't yet found anyone to talk about it.
I have the first 10 issues in single issue. I haven't read them yet, but I bought them from a dollar bin because everyone has been like, this is the greatest Hawkman run.
Yeah, Jeff Jones was pretty good, but I don't know. You can't compare the two. What he does though is he's pulling all the histories together. Like, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a great run. There's one unfortunate thing. It's like the event, like the whole Year of the Villain and Batman Who Laughs kind of got in his way. So therefore, I think
you are the biggest dark crisis or death metal
it is a
fan
great
I know.
event.
You don't get to back off that. Sorry.
No, it's a great event.
Okay. Phew.
He had to stop his
for
run for like there are 4 trade paperbacks. Trade paperback 3, I think, got interrupted by the event, and you can tell it switches. It stops for a while, and then he wraps it up in the end. But I would have loved just to see his take, and then and that's enough issues for an omnibus, a slim one, but like it would have been an omnibus, 4 trade paperbacks together. But unfortunately, like for I don't know how many issues in there, he had to kind of stop his run and do whatever mandate was. I believe, I don't know if there was mandate, but I mean, yeah, through Year of the Villain, you can tell it probably was mandate. Spoilers for Batman Superman Volume 2 hardcover though. But I loved his run, his writing, his interpretation, how he kicks things off, ties all the history together, and then even how he wraps it up. I want to read more, but again, Hawkman doesn't have an ongoing comic right now. It probably takes another 5 years again until he gets one, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. Day Tripper and the Venditti Hawkman run. Those are the next things going.
Sounds good. And then Summer League. Like I hope we're playing. Like we gotta watch at least a few more games this summer. I don't know if the schedule is out already, but there's gotta be some.
So, as you know, I grew up in New England. I grew up 2.5 hours north of my beloved Boston Celtics. So I grew up with the Celtics. That was my team. I've always had. But I married a Cleveland girl. I live in Cleveland now. I have for the last few years. So I have adopted Cleveland basketball as my identity as well. So this summer, I kind of go back and forth based on like what's going on, and obviously living in the city, I get a little bit more of that. The Celtics traded their first round pick for Derek White, and they have had very bad rookie drafting for the most part. Like there's, Grant Williams obviously played, Pritchard played a little bit off the bench, but there hasn't been much exciting. So I don't anticipate watching any Celtics summer league, but the Cavs, because they fell out of the lottery, they got to pick number 14 this past draft, and they got Abaji out of Kansas, who I don't know if we were talking about this before this, but I said going into the draft, what I want the Cavs to do is I really want a two-way wing, and I was like, hot take, right? Everyone in the league wants a two-way wing. What they go and do? They got a two-way wing. And I mean,
we'll see if he actually is the one who can lift them into the playoffs, but everyone else got a year older and more experienced as well, right? There was some of their shortcomings. They were maybe too young, too unexperienced.
Yeah, and that was the thing. It's like, they accomplished too much too fast. Like I think the team was a little surprised at their own success. And so the Karis LeVert trade was kind of just like, well, shoot, like we're doing this, we might as well keep going. And then it was like, all right, we're not here. They got derailed by injuries, and then it was like, all right, we're not quite ready for this. Like this is a team that needs to grow into itself a little bit more. But I think Abaji is a guy who complements that. Like, they didn't try and do that thing where it's like, who's the guy who has the highest upside? Like we gotta, pick number 14. We got to get that guy who like really could be that franchise changer. And then like, sure, sometimes you get a Giannis there. And then way more often you get a guy who's like out of the league and like 3 years and like no one remembers. So I think they did a smart thing saying, this is what we need right now. Let's get a guy who complements that at a spot that makes sense. Like, I don't think they reached on him. I think they did a smart thing. I was happy with it. It wasn't that home run swing, but I'm excited to see what he adds to the core.
Yeah, They got to develop him, and like you don't have to have the first pick. Like I actually watched another a video the other day. It's like all first round picks of the last 20, 30 years. There are not that many people that actually succeeded in there. Not many players. So you don't have to have a first round pick. You can, I mean, look at the Warriors. They all drafted theirs like mid to end of the first, even second round, some of them, right? Like,
to be fair, the Warriors are the anomaly. I mean, like, you get
if
that
you
with
can
like
develop them,
your Clay, you get your Clay, you get your Draymond and whatnot. But how many other teams in the league can you actually say that for? Like,
But there's always a busted, like Harrison Barnes, right? He was part of the 2015 championship, so I don't want to say anything bad, also, but like he was also one of the reasons why we lost in 2016 because he wasn't at that level, and then
almost traded him for Kevin Love at a time that Kevin Love had a crazy high.
We almost traded Klay Thompson.
Clay.
It was the best trade that was never made because Klay Thompson versus Kevin Love. I like that trade never got through. I would have traded Harrison Barnes for him.
Real quick. Did you see the Clay videos that came from him celebrating after the championship?
Oh, him running over that poor girl. Yeah. And losing his ring. Like he lost the championship. He lost his hat on the boat going to the parade. He lost his ring, but he found it back. And then he ran over that poor girl. Yeah, he was hammered. They all were hammered.
Yeah, I mean, he was drinking Hennessy right to the face and just like, I mean, like anything else wouldn't have made sense for Clay. And it's like, that makes sense.
All of them, it's a 5-6 hour event. Like it was streaming in the background. We were debating whether we should go. It's like, I don't know. It's not going to be fun standing. Like people lined up at 5 a.m. Just to be in the front row. By 8 a.m., they were already 20 rows deep. And then the parade didn't start until 11. So it's like, that wouldn't have been fun for half an hour or 2 hours of parade. We always wanted to go to one, but then again, it's a 1.5 hour drive. And we're like, no, we're good going to games, but the parade, we can skip that one. So,
do you own any pairs of Anti-Clays?
No.
Come on now.
I'm really high on Adidas, so most of my 99% of my shoes are Adidas. If it doesn't have to be dress shoes, so
that makes it tough to be a Warriors fan then, because
it's fine. I'm not into shoes. I'm collecting jerseys and hats more than anything else. Well, no, omnibus, comic book, then jerseys. Then hats, even though I hardly wear hats, but not the jerseys. I stocked up on the season before the league switched from Adidas to Nike because Nike, the first 2 seasons on Nike, like stuff ripped. Yeah, wise choice there because we got one for our kid, and at halftime we got a jersey when we went to a game. At halftime, like the letters were falling off, and you could see, I mean, even the players, like jerseys ripped easily the first 2 seasons. I don't know if they figured it out by now, but I'm good with my Adidas jerseys.
Yeah. I will say on Adidas, one of my favorite current shoe lines is the Dame line. I think that is just like one of the best values in shoes, where it's just like every year it's going to be a really decent price point. You know, it's going to be somewhere between like 100 and 120, and it's going to feel great. Like it just, it's not going to be the flashiest shoe. It's not going to like carry the Jordan name. It's not going to have the bounciest tech, but like you put that on, it feels good. It plays good. Like I love that Dame line.
Yeah, and he's a player I can support. Like he's also a Bay 100%. Area native, so him seeing him on the Warriors would be great. But I think the decision is taken.
No.
He can come off the bench.
Get out of here with that. Now you're just talking nonsense. You had too many of those Dos Equis.
Yeah, they're all out now. So I got to go and get more. But it's been fun talking to you. I'll stop.
Absolutely,
the recording
buddy.
Now.
This was great.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope we can do this again. BunkmastaB is a great guy. Love to have done this bet with him. We're going back and forth during the finals on who was up, because it was really a back and forth. The Celtics went up 1-0. The Warriors tied it 1-1. The Celtics went back up 2-1. And then the Warriors basically won the next 3 and closed it out. But it was great basketball conversation back and forth friendly chatter. Hopefully we can do that again. Hopefully next year. We played the Cavaliers 4 years in a row in the finals, so why can't we do that with the Celtics? So let's hope that's gonna happen. Year 1 is in the books. Hopefully we'll see each other in the finals again next year. Until then, thank you for watching. Let's go Warriors!